Okay, damn it, don't take it to heart. The voice of my childhood friend Dave Peterson rings in my ears. Dave stood next to me and looked at me as I tried to explain my role in the incident. Dave is now the sheriff of our small town in Ohio. There was a very bright light hanging above my head. It's like the old TV show about trying to get a sinister criminal to confess. It was so corny and funny that I laughed the whole time, even though he was serious. I looked around to see if anyone was interested. Prosecutor Martha Erickson, a large woman, looked sad as she listened to my testimony. Martha tapped 2 or 3 notebooks with her pen. As she continued to write with that damn pen, the only thing that came to her mind was, "Oh my God, woman, it's the 21st century, buy a damn iPad." Martha is about 10 years older than me. She was divorced, overweight, but beautiful. As she leaned forward, all her beautiful brown hair fell over her shoulders. Her bending forward also allowed me to see her melons, which were very large and very beautiful. I know what you're thinking, the answer is no. It's not that I don't find Martha very sexy, but I'm a woman-only man. This still unknown woman is also the reason why this man holds this position. Next to Martha is Joe Colston. Joe is my lawyer, not bad for a small-town prosecutor. Sure, you may have once worked for a major automaker in Detroit. He could still be there if he wanted, but Joe was too lazy. He only wants to do one thing at a time and only when he wants to. He spends the rest of his time behind the scenes providing paid legal advice over the internet. Joe is over 50 years old and bald. His hair completely disappeared from the front. I had a Donald Trump hairbrush that polite people smiled at but never said. Joe could have been more impressive. This is one of those Donald Trump hairstyles that makes polite people smile but never say anything. If I had given up my hair, Joe would probably be more impressive and probably more attractive to women. Damn, these are people of the 21st century. Joe, you have 3 options. Everyone thinks you're brave for admitting it. First, accept it and comb your hair as usual. Cut and style. Everyone has seen men lose their hair. It's part of life. Second, hair transplantation or hair transplantation. If they worked for Elton John, they would work for anyone. Last option, shave your beard and look like a teacher. This guy impressed women when he shaved his head and even got a cool nickname. When someone says the name, only trumpets can be heard in the background. Try. Speak, angel of death. You know, you heard yes, yes, trumpets. I'm sure this guy is a more impressive lawyer than my friend, to be honest. If you were opposing counsel, who would bother you more in court, the angel of death or Joe Combs? In any case, let's return to the scene. Sitting next to Joe and across from Dave is my only female male personality, Allison Payne. Everything is fine? The title is largely my fault. Her maiden name was Allison Scott, but I later married her, and her name became the end of hundreds of jokes. Allison is very beautiful. It was small but round. Everything about her is perfect. His hair was silky straight, red as a damn fire engine, and it was all splattered with ketchup. His skin was not like the skin of the Irish. It was like milk, but he never tanned. Your complexion is healthy and perfect. His green eyes hypnotize you, and his smile attracts you and makes you want to listen to him. I fell in love with her from the first second I met her. I know people who get so caught up in conversation when they first meet that they never hear him say all the wonderful things that come out of his mouth. Like, "Get away from me, you idiot. I'm that person. Stupidity. I was wrong again. I'm not your friend anymore. We are married." Anyway, continuing to set the scene for you, Allison is short. So, if you're expecting me to tell you that she has huge breasts that will give me the strength to look away from Martha, you're wrong. Allison's breasts may be the size of cupcakes, but they are very beautiful. They suited him perfectly. Her butt is small but curvy and it fits her perfectly. Allison smiled and did it with amazing precision. That smile bounced off the wall next to her around Joe and me. I smiled at him. It's so wonderful to be in love. When you feel this good, nothing else matters. Everything else fades into the background and becomes insignificant. Even the charges of assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, and malicious wounding that I now face pale in comparison to the fact that Allison now smiles at me and loves me. These allegations are among others we are now sharing. Ellison was also charged with kidnapping and false imprisonment. This is my daughter. Tammy Jo Dixlack, on the other hand, just looked at us. His anger, hatred, and obvious jealousy towards Allison almost ruined his enjoyment of the play. As you can imagine, Tammy Jo's parents were extremely unimaginative, but they were good people and were completely irresponsible in raising her. His mother's name was Tammy, and his father's name was Steve, but he always vowed to name his eldest son after the man who saved his life during his military service. Tammy Jo likes to be called TJ, and her two friends try to remember it. Most people consider Tammy Jo a happy person. No, this is not a play on words on his last name. It is what it is. I have a favorite nickname, Tammy Jo. I call it Skunksla. When I call it, that's what I call it. I think I should mention Skanksilla. I'm talking about Tammy Jo, my ex-wife. However, Tammy Jo and Allison are not the same. Tammy Jo is taller and curvier, but not as beautiful. Okay, let's be honest. TJ is fat now, but he wasn't always this way. She had always been sexy, but time, gravity, and depression had taken their toll. It seems that in my youth, I was a dissolute person. I think that if I like something, I should have the biggest and best version of it. I really admire women with beautiful legs. Tammy Jo has the thickest and most voluptuous legs you can find. I really like big asses. Tammy Jo would feel right at home with one of the rap stars' friends. I love breasts, and Tammy Jo's bra size is 46 quad Z or something like that. I don't know anything about bra sizes, but these things are huge. She has long, black, curly hair and icy blue eyes. Tammy Jo was my first love. We got married right after I graduated and would still be together if she hadn't been so helpful and kind. Okay, Dave shouted again. Were you responsible for the victim's injury? Equipment. I calmly looked at Dave and said, we could do it, but it's not my fault. Well, we achieved our goal, Dave said. It's your fault. She made it. Well, that's not entirely true either, I said. Look at her, Dave. She is the most beautiful thing God has created. When we worked this case, he was Sheriff Peterson, Dave said. I don't care how beautiful your wife is. I just want to know who the hell is stopping the mayor's son from doing his job, and I have the answer. Dave, this is Sheriff Peterson, sir, I said. I wanted to scream at him, but I knew that if I did, I would laugh until I cried. Then Allison starts laughing too, and we have to start all over again. I said it was an accident. I was actually trying to save that idiot when it happened. As I spoke, I noticed Martha furiously writing something down. I looked at his notebook. Martha, you idiot, it says 2, I told her. Then I looked at Dave. Actually, this is all his fault, I said, pointing to the skanksillin across the room that was Tammy Jo. Danny, how can this be Dirk's fault? I mean Tammy Jo. She was more than 100 miles away in Michigan when it all happened. Dave, today's events are the culmination of a storm that began 3 years ago when I was still married to Deeks, that is, Tammy Jo. Now, Sherman, turn on the time machine, Dave said. Let's listen to this. This guy will be in the operating room for at least a few more hours. None of us are going anywhere until we solve this problem. There is coffee and everything you need on the table. I saw Allison raise her hand. Dave turned to her. You don't have to raise your hand, Allison. This is not a school. I could tell Dave was trying to be strict. Because he's attracted to Allison, no one in the room should think that way. I just wanted to know if I could sit there, he said. It could be a long story, and I would be more comfortable listening to it. He pointed to the chair he was sitting on. Danny was sitting there, he said. If you want to sit down, I don't mind. Let's start with this story. Oh, I don't want you to give up your seat for me, he said. As Allison approached me, she and the 2 officers at the door stood up, gracefully raised one leg, and sat on my lap. Then he hugged me and put his head on my shoulder. The collective gulping of the men in the room was loud enough for me to hear, and I was actually glad I was wearing jeans. No other substance was strong enough to suppress my sexual desire. Allison smiled at Dave, who looked at her in confusion. I figured if we were going to spend time in jail, we'd better use the time we had alone. Dave nodded, and I swear he didn't even blink at that point. Oh God, no! Tammy Jo screamed. I didn't want that little slut sitting on my husband's lap. Ex-husband, I snapped. You would still be my husband if that sneaky little girl hadn't stolen me away during a little crisis in our relationship, Tammy hissed to Jo. Do you mean we should get a divorce? I called her again. Tammy Jo knows how to ruin the mood for everyone around her. Are you worried about Mrs. Payne taking care of your husband? David asked. No. Let's listen to the story, said Martha. I actually think it's cute. As long as it makes my clients happy, I'm happy, Jo said. I'm not sure, but I think I noticed Jo looking at Martha's feet. Well, I started. It all started 3 years ago. I earn a lot of money and live a full life. Many of the people I studied with had engineering degrees from the University of Michigan. I am studying manufacturing technology in the automotive industry. My partners George and Marty are also engineers. George is an electrical engineer and Marty is a mechanical engineer. It wasn't the 80s and it was hard to find work, but we bucked the trend and went against the establishment. Instead of looking for jobs with the big three or other car manufacturers, we started our own company before the ink was dry on our degrees. We opened our own consulting firm, and soon many clients wanted to hire us. I'm still with my first love, Tammy Jo, and there was no doubt that we would get married. It is the matter of time. Tammy Jo was always wild in college. She is her father's youngest daughter and plans to remain a virgin until marriage. After school, we went to different universities where I respected her decision to remain chaste until marriage while some kids at her school did not. It seems Tammy Jo was taken advantage of by some people at school who didn't. Tammy Jo was apparently attacked at her 20th birthday party. A man she dated several times concluded that her cherry was rotten and needed to be removed before it infected other parts of her body. He and several of his girlfriends got her so drunk that she couldn't walk, and then introduced her to the pleasures of sex. When he woke up the next morning, he knew something had changed, but he didn't understand why he was in so much pain. She keeps seeing guys there, and they all try to blackmail her into keeping quiet about how she's practically taken over the entire sorority. Almost everyone made the same offer. If she gave them pleasure from time to time, they remained silent. She made it. At first it was, as I said, just to shut her up, but after a while, she clearly began to like it. After a while, she could no longer hide what she was doing, but Tammy Jo noticed that none of the men involved were dating her. No one wanted to appear in public with her. None of the boys liked her because of her reputation. Everyone believes that he had sexual relations with someone unknown. Neither wants to risk contracting the pathogenic cocktail brewing in their gut. When Tammy Jo comes home, she remembers her summer vacation. She is the laughingstock of the entire campus. Nobody wants to see this. Nobody spoke to him. He not only has no male friends, but also no female friends. Her roommates also moved away to avoid contact with her. It was a student bike, but no one wanted to ride it. Interestingly, Tammy Jo, other than the first time she gave him a cherry, had never had sex and was so drunk that she barely remembered anything. That summer, when Tammy Jo and I got together and started dating, she saw an opportunity to change her image. Tammy Jo has always been a very fashionable girl. To this day, she's still a slut, and a great one at that. In fact, I'm probably right when I say that Tammy Jo is probably the most beautiful woman in any bowling alley or trailer park, anywhere. That summer, Tammy Jo and I got back together and fell in love. I fell in love with Tammy Jo's curvy body and personality. I truly believe that she loves me and would do anything for me. The interesting thing is that during our dates and in the first few months of our marriage, she was never a whore to me. During our first year together, we tried and experienced all types of sex. If only I knew. It all started innocently enough, a tragedy that destroyed our life together. Tammy Jo and I were walking along the beach near our house when we saw her. A few days later, I found out her name was Laura. She is the perfect complement to Tammy Jo. Tammy Jo is curvy and fat, while Laura is tall and thin. She was playing tennis on the court next to the beach, and her legs under her tennis skirt attracted the attention of all the local men. She's so sexy. False? Tammy Jo asked. This question surprised me a little. Not as sexy as you, honey, I said. Her legs are beautiful, but a little thin. Oh, you'll catch me tonight, she said excitedly. After a moment, he returned to the topic. As an engineer, you should pay more attention to this. I wouldn't mind if I had the opportunity. Would you like to sleep with her? Tammy Jo asked. To be honest. Perhaps, I said, looking at her suspiciously. It's almost your birthday, he said. I think I know what to give you. I don't care so much about my birthday. For the first time, I appreciated luxury. Ford was one of our clients, and I got a great discount and bought my dream car. Yes, I think everyone knows what I bought. Instead of buying these foreign sports cars, I bought a Ford GT. The GT was only in production for a few years and was designed to pay tribute to one of Ford's greatest racing cars of yesteryear. It was and remains the fastest production car Ford ever built. This is Ford's version of a supercar. It competes with Lamborghini and Ferrari and is the most expensive thing I've bought abroad. I spent most of the day putting it together and getting used to it. I was about to get on the freeway and let the car go when my cell phone rang. Danny, go home and open your presents, Tammy told Jo. Shortly thereafter, I entered the house looking for Tammy Jo. She was nowhere to be found. I'm in the bedroom, he shouted from above. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, jumping 2 or 3 steps at a time. By the time I got to our room, I was already out of breath. When I walked into the bedroom, I saw Tammy Jo leaning on our bed with one leg up. Her huge breasts hung over the edge of the bed. In our bed, between those stupid pillows, the purpose of which only a woman can understand, my two favorite things were waiting for me. Tammy Jo's butt and breasts always drive me crazy. By this point, she'd gained some weight due to dieting, but she was still incredibly sexy. I took off my pants so quickly that they thought it was for strippers. "Wait, cowboy," Tammy Jo said, turning to me. She stood up and I started drooling, even though it was so long ago and the melons in her shirt almost reached her waist. "What are we waiting for?" "I think it's a challenge," he said with a smile. "I also want to see if you want it." She lifted her large breasts and smiled at me. I quickly nodded my head up and down. "It's nice to know that you still appreciate me and that I haven't turned into a big, useless housewife that you don't care about anymore," she said. "This will never happen, TJ," I said. "Remember back then I thought I liked that bitch and then she was TJ to me." "Well," he said, "he should have gone back to watching PBS or BBC." "You won't take advantage of me tonight," he said with a smile, "at least not right away. She says in honor of your birthday, I have prepared this for you." The door to our bathroom opened and Laura came out wearing only a bow tie and heels, the bandage wrapped around her small breasts, her back, and hugged her narrow waist. "You can contact me whenever you want," he said. "Fine. The first thing you should know is that I have always been a single woman, but damn, it's my birthday, and there's just something about Laura. She has qualities that Tammy Jo doesn't have. She's really beautiful. She is also very kind. Tammy Jo has a great body and I love her, but she has a beautiful body but an ugly face. Tammy Jo isn't very good either. She's always been a whore, but not my type, and having money only makes it worse. Tammy Jo will be angry if I tell her I don't want her gift. I'm not a coward, but I don't want this bitch simmering under the surface." "I'll be back in a few hours," Tammy Jo said, "unless you call me and ask me to stay a little longer. Tohan, the door is closed." All sorts of alarm bells went off in my head. I looked at Laura, she looked at me and smiled. She walked slowly towards me, her heels squeaking on the floor. On paper, she seemed much hotter than Tammy Jo, but for some reason I didn't like it and pulled my pants up. Laura looked depressed. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "You are literally the best birthday present I have ever received. You're even better than my car." His expression instantly changed. "What car?" she asked. "Ford GT, I say." "To me, you are trash," he said. "Can we go together? Can I look under the hood?" We spent 2 hours meeting with friends. We drove off and I asked him to look under the hood. We discussed all types of engine designs and modifications. Laura told me that she felt very comfortable with me. Tammy Jo just gave me a birthday kiss when she came home. Tammy Jo smiled from ear to ear as she watched Laura get into her car and drive away. "Did you have fun?" she asked. I nodded without lying. "We really had a great time." "It's not as bad as you think, right?" she asked. "What?" I asked. I was about to tell her that nothing happened when she again started saying the same nonsense she had been talking about for weeks, annoying me. Tammy Jo had been suggesting and discussing the possibility of us joining a sex group for over a month. No, I know what you're thinking. I tried several times to tell Tammy Jo that I didn't like her, but she wouldn't do it. Beat the same horse from every possible angle. The look on my face when he mentioned it said he had made a mistake, so he let the night end. A week later, Laura returned. I asked him if he forgot anything, and he told me that he came for the same reason as last time. "Did Tammy Jo convince you to try again?" I asked. "She didn't need to convince me," Laura said. "After meeting you last week, I really liked you and the way you kissed." "Where's Tammy Jo?" I asked. Laura said she was shopping. She says that she likes you too much to look at you the first few times and that being here might make you nervous. He said that over time you get used to it. I sat and frowned. Laura came up to me and started touching my shoulders. "His touch is really nice. Why don't you tell me?" She said I told her she might be stupid and old-fashioned, but I really like Tammy Jo. "I don't need anyone, either in bed or in life, except my friends." She told me Tammy Jo loved me too. Tammy Jo's efforts on my behalf make me happy, the efforts of an extraordinary woman. I nodded, but I wanted to show Tammy Jo that she was all I needed. This is how we spent Laura's second visit. Everything changed when I met Laura for the third time. Tammy Jo told me we had a barbecue when I got home from work that evening. It was us and 2 other couples, the first couple I met from our region. They live a few blocks from here, and I've talked to this guy a few times about my car. Actually, that's how we met her. When the second car arrived, I was shocked. It is Laura who is pulling the boy running behind her. He was too old for them, and they had some problems. "You know Laura?" Tammy Jo said. "He wore a bikini, and the girls had no control over him. This is Ken, Laura's boyfriend. The boy came up to shake my hand, and I looked at him. Something is wrong with him. At first, his smile was more of a smile than a smile. It's like he knows something that I don't know, and it's very interesting. I didn't like it right away. I just pretended that I didn't notice how he extended his hand. Secondly, his reaction to Tammy Jo was unsatisfactory. Neighbor Bob kept his eyes on TJ's chest. Like most people, Tammy Jo should never wear that damn top in front of people, I told her that night. But Ken didn't react at all. Either he's gay or he sees my wife's breasts so often that she doesn't touch him anymore. Tammy Jo's hooters always touched me and I married her. After we ate, the neighbor couple thanked us and allowed us to leave. They had a little boy and the nanny didn't stay there long. While we were relaxing by the pool, Ken struck up a conversation. "Damn, that's some kind of machine," he said. Laura never stopped talking about it. Laura looked at her feet. I thought I could show off my car and it gave them a bad feeling. I said it's just a car. I couldn't believe it for a moment, but I tried to lighten the mood. "I really wanted to ride it," he said with a smile. My keen senses were tingling because damn, she was already in the car. She even wore it. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the keys and threw them to him. "Be careful," I say. "The clutch is tight and power comes on quickly." He threw me the keys. "Can you accept?" I ask him. She really wanted it, and I wanted her to have this experience and enjoy it, but I didn't know how to drive. "Come on, Danny," Tammy Jo said. "You like to show this attention and talk about it." Old Danny, blind, stupid, and naive, wandered around with Laura, hoping that someone would tell me what was wrong. Laura was also wearing a swimsuit and told me that she was going to cover herself with something. When she stood up, I saw it, although I had never noticed it. Laura was excited. Laura is beautiful, but Tammy Jo is just sexy. Laura is the kind of woman you can go to a party or party with in a tuxedo or little black dress. If you walked in with her on your arm, you would become the envy of all the men present. But Tammy Jo is the kind of woman you want to see as soon as you see her. You should take this. It is something written into the DNA code of every man and even some women. Looking at her, I smiled and said that I love her. "I'm glad it's mine. May your lunches and days be spent in hell." What is a party? This is another oddity that I didn't notice. When Laura said she was wearing something, Ken told her to stay calm. What kind of man would send his wife to another man in a revealing swimsuit? I looked at Tammy Jo. "Now I'll change my mind," Tammy Jo said. Laura and I went out and looked around. We were driving on the freeway and trying to get the car up to 200 miles per hour. About half an hour later, much earlier than expected, we returned. Laura was sitting by the pool. I walked in and saw her. "Who slept with my wife?" I crossed the hall before they knew I was coming. I tried my best to kick Ken's ass. Then I threw him to the ground and started hitting him over and over again until Tammy Jo grabbed me and pulled me away from her. "Danny, what are you doing?" "You're going to kill him," he shouted. "You're such a natural, approachable girl," I spat. "Leave my house and take this with you." Ken was lying on the floor moaning for a different reason. Despite what I did to him, he remained relatively unharmed. Laura came in and looked at him. "What happened to him?" she asked. I misinterpreted Laura's expression again, seeing as how she doesn't care if her boyfriend kicks her ass. I think he could beat her and she feels like she deserves what she gets. I made a mistake. "Take him home," Tammy Jo said. "Everything will be fine." His eyes were swollen shut and there were a few cuts, but it was just a big misunderstanding. I stood up and watched as Laura led Ken to the front door. None of them said anything. "Why are you still in my house?" I asked. "Tammy Jo, I told you to stay the course and I meant it." Tammy Jo just showed me a deer caught in headlights. I expected a violent reaction from him. He would sarcastically insult me and say that if I weren't so terrible in bed, I wouldn't have to go to him. Maybe try the classic line, "This is not the routine you imagine you're trying to get out of," or the straightforward line, "Damn it, it's my house that's moving too." In the end, everything is different anyway. His face became distorted, he became dissatisfied, and even began to cry. She looked hurt and broken. It was as if his whole world had collapsed. The funny thing is that he looks and acts like he hasn't done anything wrong. It seemed like it was my fault. I felt like we had a long-standing rule or code of conduct and I had just broken it. Stupidity. I still love that stupid woman. That is why his crisis affected me deeply. Yes, I went up to her, hugged her, and said that everything would be fine. I vowed that even if my lawyer insisted that we sign a prenuptial agreement, I would be very generous with the divorce. All he did was scream and cry harder. She pushed me away and ran to the table. He took out a pen and wrote in childish handwriting, "I do not and will not accept money from Danny and his damn company." She signed it, handed it to me, and cried even more. I know, and I'm sure she knows, that she won't be held accountable, but I'm curious. If it's not about money, then what is it? What do you want, TJ? I asked you. You can also buy a house. Look, I'm giving you more money than the commitment, even though we both signed the commitment. Surprisingly, this didn't help. She just started crying harder. Maybe we're just not who we thought we were, I said. That way you can go out and do whatever you want, without worrying about me finding out about it. She cried harder. I am lost. What do you want, TJ? I asked again. I just want you, he cried. That's all I want. That's all I want. This has nothing to do with how you had sex a few minutes ago, I said. Maybe you and he can settle down somewhere and be truly happy together. She looked at me as if I was very stupid. He actually wiped away his tears, cocked his head to the side, and looked at me the way a dog does when its owner does something really stupid. I turned around and looked around to see if there was anyone else in the room. She just shook her head. You really don't understand anything, do you? She says. I understand that I will no longer marry the man who cheated on me, I said. How did I lie to you? She asked. Explain to me, Danny. I love you with all my heart. You and I will be together until the stars fade and fall from the sky. Tammy Jo, you really need to take this shit to another level, I said. Danny, love and sex are not the same thing, he told me. He said all this very calmly and very slowly. It was like I was talking to a very stupid child. You and I are still young, and we still have a lot of money to spend. We're still figuring out what we like and defining the parameters of our life together. Maybe I'm a little crazy. It's impossible to change, but now I want to test something. Our sex life is so wonderful that I always want to develop further and learn more about the different aspects of human sexuality. I was shocked. One of us has problems with his head. At that moment, I could not understand whether it was her or me. She did everything so normally and logically. What does this have to do with you cheating on me and having sex like a whore in our living room? I asked. I didn't betray you. She gasped harder. Danny, I've been trying to get you to identify me for over a month. This is what I really want to do. You say no, and I respect that. I have to accept your decision, but that doesn't mean I can't try again from a different angle. And again, he said it so calmly and matter-of-factly that I had to accept his logic. I thought if you're not going to have a real sex party, maybe I should start small, he said. You know, it's like a threesome or wife swapping. You're welcome to do so, and as you become more comfortable with the idea, we can gradually move forward. Either that or I'll burn everything in the system. I'd give it up too, I shouted. I don't want to swing. I don't want another woman. You're all I need, TJ. So if you asked me this question, I would also answer no. But Danny, you didn't, he said. You really had a lot of fun. All this makes me laugh now. I felt fat and unattractive. I feel like I might lose you. Tammy Jo, what are you talking about? I asked. You never said anything about changing wives, and we never had a fucking threesome unless you were talking about you and Two-Face Ken. I can't believe this bastard. I'll pretend to be my friend, and then Danny, what do you think we'll do? She asked. That's why I gave you Laura. Don't you think it's fair that Ken would accept me if you loved Laura? This is called a wife exchange, not a gift to the wife. But I began, speechless, anger filling me. I knew that I needed to calm down and be very careful in my actions and even what I said. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't sleeping with Laura. This will get me in trouble because she will say that I should tell her. I didn't tell her it was a mistake. It was a lie, and she took advantage of it, even if he just wanted to ignore his feelings. I also realized that Tammy Jo was manipulating the entire situation to get me to do what she wanted. Tammy Jo, I need to think about this, I said. I needed to make the best decision for both of us. What should you consider? She asked. You explained how you felt, and I explained how I felt. We clearly disagreed on some minor issues. We will discuss and resolve this issue. No, Tammy Jo, I said. This was a fucking scam on your part from the very beginning. They manipulated the whole situation, and I'm not sure it will stop the deal. I need to think about this. Danny, this will be the only time, he said. I didn't know you were so serious. You always give in to me. Do not be mad at me. Tammy Jo, I'm so mad at you. This doesn't mean you got drunk and peed in the pool. I'm wondering if I should try to work this out first or file for divorce first. She seemed genuinely surprised. Danny, we'll be together forever, he said quietly. We won't part. I just smiled and went to the guest room. I sat down in the chair next to the bed and seriously thought about the situation. Perhaps some tips will help. Perhaps it all had to do with what TJ told me about what happened to him on his first day of college. She may have hidden mental issues affecting her. An hour later, I heard someone knocking on the door handle. Then someone knocked on the door. "Danny, can we go to bed?" she asked me. "Tammy Joe, I'm not going to sleep with you," I told her. "Good night, Danny, it's not fair," he shouted. "I love you, can't you forgive? Doesn't matter." "You might not mind, TJ," I said. "Good night." The next morning, Tammy Joe woke up before me. I heard her making noise in the house and then leaving. I thought I couldn't wait to meet Ken, but I didn't care. I think what bothered me the most was his behavior. I got up and took a long, hot shower. The best thing about owning a business is that no one can tell me when I need to take a break from work. I was getting dressed and thinking about going to work when I heard him enter the house. He disappeared for about an hour and a half. I thought maybe Ken would become a man for a while. "Danny, breakfast," he called. I didn't answer. When I went downstairs to get my keys and iPad, I noticed she had come out and bought us breakfast. Tammy Joe can't cook. He put everything on the table, pancakes, maple syrup, bacon, and everything else, and made fresh coffee. Everything looked good and I was hungry, but I walked past it and left the house. Arriving at the office, I tried to concentrate on my work. Many times I searched the internet for articles about cheating, infidelity, and divorce, but never took any action. When I got home that evening, Tammy Joe was all dressed up. She looks absolutely stunning in this outfit, and this time is no exception. But at night I noticed something else. The charm was gone. One of the interesting phenomena of human nature is the science of perception. We tend to see only the good in the things we love, and it's even worse when we're in love. Honestly, that night was the first time I took a close look at Tammy Joe and realized her mistakes. She was always nice to me when she got her way, but I have to admit that everyone thought she was a slut. Tammy Joe's face was never special, but I didn't care because I loved her. The night I saw this, I knew something was missing. When I finally saw her put on the too-tight dress, I noticed that her waist was noticeably thicker, although I had always been attracted to her large breasts and round hips. "I think we could have dinner at Texas Roadhouse tonight," he whispered to me as I walked by. "No thanks," I said. "Danny, please give me a chance to solve this problem," he said. "I love you more than you can imagine. There's nothing more important to me than us." "I think so." "TJ," I said. This conversation got me thinking about forgiveness again, but I didn't talk to him much for the next few days. Even though I could tell she was upset, I wasn't ready to talk to her. The wound was too fresh. I wonder what Laura thinks. Perhaps she was sad too. I also wonder how Ken survived the beating. I wish I had thought about this earlier. During the barbecue, I remember thinking that things weren't going well for Laura and Ken. Maybe that's why he's willing to let other men sleep with her. As beautiful as Laura is, I wouldn't change her or Tammy Joe. I love Tammy Joe so much it hurts. At that moment, I couldn't imagine life without her, so I knew what to do. The next morning before leaving, I walked into the room and kissed Tammy Joe goodbye. When I did this, she moaned softly and tried to carry me to her bed. "I miss you so much," he moaned. Then I shrugged my shoulders and got to work. I called Laura as soon as I got to the office. It seemed to me that she was a little depressed, and I was emotionally guarded. I wonder if that idiot was trying to blame him for hitting her. "Laura, are you okay?" I asked. "That's not true," he said. I heard a note of sadness in his voice. "What's happened?" I asked. "Can you come talk?" she asked. I said yes and asked for directions. I didn't feel comfortable going to his house, so I told him. He gave me the address of a park near his house. I came to the park, and when I saw Laura, I remembered that day she was playing tennis near the beach. She is very beautiful, but she belongs to this idiot. As I came closer, I saw that he was crying. "What happened, Laura? I'm sorry for what I did to Ken. Everything is fine?" "I'm not sorry, but I wish he wouldn't take it out on you." "Why did he have to do this?" he asked with a confused look on his face. "Because he thinks you and I had sex, and he thinks my reaction when I found out he was with Tammy Joe was wrong," I said. "This is what bothers me the most," he complained. "You and I don't really do that." "Then you can talk to him about it and he won't bother you," I said. Laura just started crying. I took her to the bank. "Okay, Laura, tell me what happened," I said. "I'm a good girl," she laments. "I ruined everything, so I didn't have the opportunity to be with you, right?" "What are you saying?" I asked. "Your wife paid me to come to your house and get engaged to you on your birthday," he said. "I am a student. I have student loans, rent, tuition, and bills." He worked part-time but barely made ends meet. That day she gave me $1,000. The money was too good to pass up. I love him very much, and I love you very much. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, but about a week later he called again and I said yes again. Honestly, I'd do it for free. She stopped to wipe away her tears. Both times you didn't attack me. I started thinking about what you did and waited for her to call me back. My hopes probably rose when he called me for the third time and asked me to bring a bathing suit. But I noticed the attention you paid to her and the way you looked at her. I realized he didn't stand a chance because you really loved him, she said. Is Ken upset about this? I asked. Did he find out that you have feelings for me? She started laughing. I first met Ken at a barbecue. His wife asked me to pick him up and take him with me. When I came to your house, I heard for the first time that he was my friend. I thought it was some kind of role-playing game. I decided that if I had you, everything would be fine. I suddenly became angry again. I thanked Laura and got into the car. While returning to work, I called my lawyer and told him that I needed to start divorce proceedings. My then lawyer, Joe Colston, was new to the firm. My old lawyer got a promotion. He asked if I had a copy of the original prenuptial agreement. I told him he could come and fax it to him or take it to him so he could go to work. In fact, the lump in my throat was not as bad as I thought. Maybe it's because I've spent the last few days thinking about how to get rid of the lying Tammy Jo. I mentioned that I was most angry with her for her manipulations and lies. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Good. When it rained and it rained on me for a whole week. I got wet and didn't even think I'd dry out again. I don't want any problems with Tammy Jo. I just want this to end. My plan was to park at the end of the street, make my way home, collect the necessary documents, and return to work. Of course, everything went wrong. As I slowly opened the door to the pool and patio, I saw Tammy Jo relaxing by the pool. She was lying on her back on one of our sun loungers, her huge breasts bathed in the sun's rays. Unfortunately, Ken was between her legs, loving her with all his heart while she relaxed. I pleasured two other men at the same time. I watched this scene and suddenly the silence ended. I closed the door and they were shocked. "Oh no," Tammy Jo said. "Oh crap," Ken said. He left Tammy Jo but tried to keep her between us. He quickly walked over to the fence and tried to climb our 8-foot fence but couldn't find the anchor. He was always barefoot and naked as a hawk and would rather try to jump over the fence and walk away naked than look at me. Apparently, these blows left a deep mark on him. Another boy is getting dressed. I walked up to the front door. Tammy Jo started crying. "Danny, you need to let me explain." I just laughed. "I wanted the gun back," Ken said. Knowing my house, Ken knew that I had a large collection of swords, battle axes, and other weapons. One of the boys tried to stop me from getting to the door. The other ran towards the door, still naked like Ken. The boy in front of him opened his mouth as if about to say something. I hit him. "What?" I asked. I was still in shock from the explosion. "What?" I asked him again. Then I hit him again and pushed him away from me. When I left the house with the necessary documents, 3 people disappeared. "Danny, please," said Tammy Jo. It was strangely calm. "Now you can tell me what you want, Tammy Jo," I told her. Then I returned to work. "When I get home tonight, I want you and all your things gone." Less than a week ago, I offered them a good divorce. I gave you a house and money, and maybe one day, when the pain is over, we can still be friends. The offer was withdrawn. I will keep my promise. For every year of marriage, you receive $10,000 and not a cent more. I took my checkbook out of my pocket and wrote him a check for $20. "You can also keep the car." "No, Danny," he said. "I just want things to get better." "Tammy Jo, time is running out," I snapped. "Danny, I had to give him 2 more to solve the problem with Ken and Laura. You went to Laura 3 times. "That's all I had to do to finish without anyone getting mad," he said. Having done this, I will never do anything like that again. I just smiled at him. "It's okay, TJ," I said. "This is logic. I understand." "Yes," she said, smiling. "Yes, I finally understand what a lying, cheating, hairy bitch you are," I said. Then I changed my mind. "Keep the receipt, but call a taxi. I still have my car." "So?" she complained. "Because you lied to me at least twice," I said. "I spoke to Laura today. She and Ken met at a barbecue. I'd rather be his friend than this idiot, which means you lied when you said you needed to make up with him. Who were the other 2? If they wanted to take care of Ken, why are they here? And you paid Laura to be with me. Step back. Get out of my house and out of my life, you fickle bitch." "But Danny, if we all do this, it won't be cheating. If you're with Laura, why can't I have someone else?" she complained. "It's just sex. I do not like him. It was just something I had to try. Listen, idiot, I said it. Call Laura and ask her the truth. I never slept with her. I love you, Tammy Jo. You are always enough for me. I never needed anyone else. If it matters, then the things that bother you shouldn't bother you as much because you are still a lot. Then I walked away and left her screaming and crying on the terrace. I gave my new lawyer a copy of the prenuptial agreement. He asked me when and where the documents would be delivered. I didn't know, so I asked him to wait. I took out my cell phone and called home. I pretended to be upset when Tammy Jo answered the phone. Damn it. TJ, I've loved you for so long and now I don't know how to live without you, I told him. It was one thing to be angry at you for about a week, but suddenly I was faced with the fact that you were no longer in my life. I was very angry, but I wasn't sure I could handle it. Can we talk about this again? Asked. Yes, Danny, he said. Whatever you want, baby, I'll do anything. I really love you. Dinner, I said. Texas Roadhouse wore a tight red dress at 6 p.m. Should you wear underwear underneath? She asked. Perhaps not, I said, as if pondering the question. But Tammy Jo, whether you wear panties or not, you need to know two things before you go to that meeting. First, you must be willing to tell me the truth about what happened and why. It's okay, she said. Danny, what else? Secondly, you will be surprised whether you're wearing underwear or not. Oh, honey, that sounds good to me, he smiled. I contacted a lawyer. I said, send the documents at 18 o'clock. Serve them up at Texas Roadhouse. He just shook his head as I walked away. I knew he thought I was an idiot, but I didn't know the whole story. The following weeks were tense. He hired a lawyer and tried to contest the divorce. My lawyer thought it was funny. She made no attempt to change or dissolve the marriage contract. She wasn't trying to get more money or a house or anything like that. She just doesn't want a divorce. He placed a full-page ad in the local newspaper declaring his love for me. I remained persistent and determined. Finally, the divorce was settled, and I was able to start building my life again. I'm not as scary as you think. I could have walked away and left him 20,000 people, but I didn't. I love it. That's why I don't want him to lose his livelihood. I gave him a third of my savings and investments as well as my house. It seems that this is not enough. He spent some of the money on therapy. He spent more money on various cruises designed to help people solve their problems. I know she does these things because she keeps texting me to let me know about it. He often shows up at my new apartment and tries to talk to me or do something else. One of the most daring events was my birthday. She came in high heels and a raincoat with nothing underneath. He told me that since we met, even before we got married, we made love every year on our anniversary. So he sees no reason to stop now. It was a very tempting offer for me, but I refused. She didn't agree, so I had to call the police. I miss her so much, but I'm trying to move on. It was as if they wanted to invite her to a party, but the dog simply refused to go. One morning, shortly after the incident, I was driving to work and had to take an alternative route due to a road closure due to construction work. Having never traveled this road before, I saw many things I had never seen before. One of them is a small cafe with a small outdoor seating area. Looks like one of those little roadside cafes. For some reason, I decided to stop for breakfast. I don't know why I did it, but I'm glad I did. This morning, I sat there and ate a light breakfast of bacon, muffins, and a cup of coffee. When this happened, I thought about how terrible my life had been. I wasn't happy because my marriage was over. I got divorced almost a year ago, and I still haven't gotten over TJ because she won't let me. I also can't forget TJ because, let's face it, his body is hard to forget. Even though her belly had grown to the point of being almost pig-like over the past year, I couldn't get her out of my mind. Help comes when you least expect it. As I sat there immersed in coffee, my happiness changed. I'm sitting in a cafe having breakfast, my limited edition Ford GT sports car parked a few meters away. Even though the car is already a year old, it still attracts a lot of attention. As I was getting ready to go to work, I was hit by a truck. The sound of the collision was so loud that everyone heard it. Parts of the car's carbon and aluminum body were scattered over half a block. This car is an engineering marvel. The manufacturing process is almost surgically precise and high quality. But apparently they don't make them like they used to, because the 15-year-old F-150 Super Cub he hit barely escaped with a scratch. At first I was shocked. Then I ran to see if the truck driver was injured. I opened the door and looked into the most scared eyes I've ever seen. They were such a pure green color that I lost my mind. The angel's face was surrounded by a ring of red hair, leaving me speechless. I would run over Tammy Jo with a bulldozer just to see that woman. I asked her if everything was okay. She shrugged and looked at me. "I think so," he said. I knew my brakes were terrible, but I didn't think they would fail. "Pacific Standard Time," I said. "Never share unnecessary information. The owner of the car you wrecked may try to use it against you in court." "Oh, thank you," he said. "What kind of car is this? Is the injury serious? I can't afford major renovations." "Don't worry," I said. "Your insurance will cover these costs." "Shh," he said, looking at me darkly. "I don't have insurance." "You have a problem," I said. "Not yet," he smiled. I said that's not what I meant. "The car is expensive and many people see you sitting in it. I'm pretty sure it's completely damaged." "When you say sweetheart, what do you mean?" she asked. "I'm pretty sure there are more than 100,000, I said. I saw that his face was tense and he suddenly looked like he was about to fall. I managed to catch her before she fell to the ground. When I carried her to the grass and laid her gently on the ground, all her silky red hair flew away. The first thing I noticed was the light here. She's shorter than Tammy Jo and much slimmer. He weighed just over 100 kilograms. She woke up and smiled at me. The ambulance arrived immediately. The technician took me aside and began to tend to her. They said she was fine and still needed to be checked out at the hospital. The police came to talk to me. His eyes were so big they looked almost comical. He apologized so much that it showed on his face. "I'm very sorry," he said. "If I spend my whole life, I will definitely return it to you." The look on his face was so sincere and sincerely apologetic that it melted my heart. "When I found a job or an apartment," he added, "I almost lost it." "Where have you lived so far?" I asked. "In my truck," he said, "but now the police have taken him away." I started laughing a lot. The rest of the day passed quickly. We went to the hospital and examined her. Other than a few bruises from the blow, she was unharmed. Feeling indebted to me, I convinced her to stay in my guest room until her truck was freed. I assured him that the door was locked and he could use it. "Promise me you won't do anything funny," he said. I assured her and she nodded. "I don't want to hurt you because you're so good to me." He said seriously. I went shopping with her, but she didn't like it. I bought her similar clothes, including jeans and sneakers, but insisted she buy a few more skirts, cute blouses, and nice shoes. "I already owe you more money than I've ever made in my life," he said. "Why do I need all these fashionable things? I like jeans, but I wouldn't wear these dresses." "You must." "Ellie, I said you can't wear jeans to work." "I don't have a job, Daniel James Payne," he said, laughing. "I think I can get you a job where I work," I said. "Clear or save?" she asked. "You'll see tomorrow when we get there," I laughed. I drove Allison back to my apartment. She really liked it. She walked around and looked around. She offered to cook something for me, but I told her that I was shocked by the incident and asked our only best friend about it. The pizza was hot and delicious, especially in their company. While we waited for delivery, Allison took a hot shower and we discovered our first problem. He came out of the bathroom with only a towel. We bought him new underwear, but not pajamas. I gave her an old nightgown and she rolled up her sleeves and legs, and it was the sexiest lingerie I've ever seen. She fell asleep in front of the fire. I covered her with a blanket and went to my room to sleep. I've known Allison for a little over 12 hours, and for the first time in a long time, I don't think about Tammy Jo. The next morning, he woke up on the couch and looked around. She was about to go to the bathroom when I came out. "Put on a skirt and shirt," I told her. "Let's go to work." I introduced Allison to my colleagues and partners. "This is Allison, my new assistant," I said. She looked at me strangely. "Learn fast and work hard." In less than a month, the work efficiency is very high. We encountered several problems. Police said his truck was a road hazard. It should only be taken to a qualified workshop. Repairing the truck cost more than it was worth. They fined her for not having the insurance I lent her. Allison cooks, cleans the apartment, and works as my assistant. I told her that I needed a maid to clean and thought that perhaps Ellie was too tired after a long day of work. "It's not a burden for me," he said. "You've done everything for me. It's the least I can do. But you won't have to worry about me for long, so?" I asked. "I found an apartment today," he said. "It is small and not very beautiful, but I can easily afford it thanks to the extra salary you pay me. Then maybe I can start paying back the money." I was shocked, but I just nodded. I want to tell him that I don't want him to leave, but for some reason I can't. Perhaps I didn't say anything because Tammy Jo was manipulating me. The next big surprise came a few weeks later when we got home and she announced she had a date. "One of my colleagues was kind enough to ask me out," he said. "He showed me the city. I wondered what else he wanted to show her, but he didn't say anything. While Allison was preparing for the meeting, I was worried. When he came out, he looked great. I became even more angry. I'm angrier than I was when I saw Tammy Joe and Ken together. I didn't say a word to him. I was waiting for this guy to come visit me so I could fire him the next day. Fine. I'll go, he said cheerfully. Do not wait, I might be late. Come on, I said. She smiled at me and opened the door. She looked at me again as if I needed to do or say something. What did she expect? Since I'm sitting here wishing she was with me, should I politely ask her to go out and have a good time? Will Hallmark make a "I hope you have a good sex life" card? I walked around the apartment all night. When I was 22, I thought about calling him, but I didn't. I was saved when my phone rang. I answered, thinking it was her. Allison, are you okay? I let it go. Is that the name of the little red-haired slut you invited to dinner? Tammy asked in Joe's angry voice. What exactly is your problem? Danny, I'm going to therapy and doing everything I can to repair our marriage. I can't even miss you on our birthdays, but you can invite a stranger to dinner every day. I almost laughed. I would have done it if I wasn't so angry at Allison. Tammy Joe, the word divorce means we are no longer married. We don't have a marriage that can be saved. You should go and try to deceive other people. I don't have this need. Now we are all free. Do what we want to do. You can ride horses or have a sex party, whatever you want to call it. I could invite some beautiful redheads to dinner. I don't know Danny, Tammy Joe said. She's so small, I may have to destroy it. If you really care about them, you should get rid of them. I just smiled and hung up. Allison returns to her apartment at 1 in the morning. I ran to my room when I heard her open the door. The next morning he didn't say anything, but he looked happy. I avoided talking to her all day and didn't invite her to dinner. When he came to my office during lunch, I told him I was too busy to stop working. But he could enjoy his lunch. He said we could order something and bring it here. I said I wasn't hungry and couldn't be distracted. She looked angry, but Caroline immediately led her away. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my mobile phone rang. Good call, Danny, Tammy Joe said. He really wanted to hurt this girl. You are mine and I will get you back. Besides, he's not your type. I hung up again. The next 4 nights were a repeat of the previous night. Allison seemed to have a date every night. Things got even worse between us. Finally, I asked him when he was leaving. I can't handle this anymore. That was all he said quickly, but for some reason he didn't look happy. That night, shortly after Allison left for her date, there was a knock on my door. I thought it was Tammy Joe, but it turned out to be Joe Dawson, the maintenance guy at my apartment complex. He was a good guy, and we became friends, even friends. Mr. Payne, why did you treat her like that? I asked him. With whom? I asked him to come back. I'm sure Tammy Joe had something to do with it. He said to Miss Ellison, why are you so cruel to her? This woman is crazy about you. She only talks about you. I know you had a bad divorce and your ex-wife was a bitch, but Allison isn't like that. She doesn't deserve this nonsense. I raised my hand to stop him. What are you talking about, Joe? I asked. Well, you bring them home every night in front of your wife. Then you force her to leave the apartment so you can do it, he said, and I laughed. Opened the door further and showed him my empty house. Joe, you're completely wrong, I said. Allison loves dating. She goes out every night. Suddenly he looked at me strangely and started laughing. Sorry to bother you, Mr. Payne. His laugh made me angry. Joe, what happened? I asked. He looked at me and smiled again. This is the same thing my mother did to my father, he said. Looks like you got caught too. Follow me. I followed Joe down the hallway. We go along the corridor and enter the laundry room. Each apartment has its own washer and dryer, so few residents use the laundry facilities. He carefully opened the door and allowed me to look inside. Allison was sitting in a chair, reading a book and yawning. I took a step back from the door. Your meeting today will have to be canceled, I said. Poor girl. I wonder why she doesn't come home. He said she did this every night. I was a little worried because he wanted to cast me as Tammy Joe. I knew how to handle it, but I was also relieved to know that she wasn't dating anyone. 2 hours later, Joe called me and told me Allison was coming home. I left the apartment and turned off all the lights. He walked down the back stairs, got into his car, and drove down the street. A few minutes later, I saw Allison look through the door of the building and see that my car was gone. I waited half an hour and went home. My zipper was open. I had lipstick stains on my collar and my shirt was unbuttoned, as if I was getting dressed in the dark. When I walked into the room, Allison was sitting on the couch with her arms crossed, looking angry. The fire in those green eyes was truly frightening. "Where have you been?" she almost screamed at me. He stood up from the couch and walked over to take a closer look. I smiled and said, "I have a date too." He saw the zipper I had unzipped and the lipstick on my neck. She started crying and ran to her room. I knocked on the door and heard sobs coming from inside. I slowly opened the door and saw her lying face down on the bed. I couldn't stop laughing. Over the past few weeks, I realized that although I didn't say anything about it, I had very strong feelings for Allison. I think as much as it hurts to see her suffer, part of me feels like she deserves it for the game she plays. If she tried to manipulate me like Tammy Jo, I wanted nothing to do with her. She turned to me and my heart melted. She looked so pathetic that I wanted to scold myself for hurting her. "I'll leave tomorrow morning when you go to work," he says, "unless you want me to leave early." "Allison, come on," I said. "How could I be so stupid?" he asked between sobs. That's when I realized that once she started crying, she quickly went from extremely attractive to very funny. Take, for example, a beautiful woman whose face is distorted by tears and crying, and you will understand what I mean. I laughed again at the idea. "I never wanted to do this," he shouted. "It was Caroline's idea. Let's see where it goes." "Ellie, what are you talking about?" I asked. Perhaps he mistook my surprised look for indifference or contempt, because his sadness immediately turned to anger. "God, you really are an idiot," he exploded. "Why can't I fall in love with someone who doesn't hurt?" I was shocked. My eyes widened in surprise as she looked at me. "You," I said, pointing at her. "Love," I added, admitting that the word sounded bitter and strange on my tongue. I never thought I would repeat this word after Tammy Jo. I asked curiously, "Why do you need to know this?" He exploded. "This is one more thing to laugh about with every woman you meet." "What are you talking about, Ellie?" I asked. "I'm not stupid," she exploded. "You come home and it smells like perfume. There's lipstick on your neck and your clothes are stained from your date." "Well, let's look at the evidence, Ellie," I said. "Maybe you really are stupid." She looked at me as if she wanted to say something, but I interrupted her by covering her hand with mine. "Can we discuss this calmly?" asked. She nodded, and as soon as I let go of her hand, she started again. "I just want to do it," she shouted before he interrupted her again. This time I covered his mouth with mine. Allison's lips are the softest and most flexible I have ever felt. At first she resisted, then she disappeared inside me. Finally she hugged me and started kissing me back. He turned me onto my back and greedily devoured my lips. Then she abruptly left. "I shouldn't have done this." "You just came back from being a curmudgeon and calling me stupid," she said. "So why would you do this?" I asked jokingly. "Because I want it," he said, pursing his lips. "Love me," I said sarcastically. "No, that's not the point," he said dryly. "You already said it. I say there is no turning back. Ellie, look at the lipstick on my neck." She looked at him and seemed to get even angrier. "Where can I buy lipstick?" she asked. "On your dresser, Ellie," I said. "This is your lipstick. It's amazing. The perfume you smell is also yours." She just looked at me strangely. "I just beat you at your game," I told him. "Ellie, if there's anyone I should go with, it's you. Your plan worked. I'm so jealous of the guys you see, but I can't say anything. I have a hard time trusting anyone after what my ex did to me." Ellie simply nodded and held out her hands to me. I wondered if I could trust him, so I didn't tell him what I knew. I wanted to see if she would confess. "You went on dates 5 nights in a row, and I sat at home and was jealous," I told him. "I want you to know that I too can come out and give you an idea of what it's like." "I didn't want to do it," he said. "Caroline told me that your heart is broken, and you will never tell me how you feel unless I push you. All I want is for you to tell me not to go. Then I would have known if you had feelings for me, but you didn't, so I had to continue the relationship. At first we tried to hide it at work, but everyone knew us too well. After 2 days, people looked at me and said, 'Wow, looks like you're finally sober.' And my dear damn Danny, write to me whatever you want." Of course, Caroline was the first to understand all this. This woman is extraordinary. That's probably why Marty married her. We just returned from a staff meeting. There were 3 partners, George, Marty, and myself, and Caroline, Tom, and Allison. Caroline looked at Ellie and me. Suddenly, Caroline, known more for her insight than her wit, blurted out, "They were both asleep, weren't they?" "Oh my God, you're in love," he said. "Carrie, why did you come up with such a ridiculous idea?" Her husband asked. "Marty is one of my old best friends. He wanted nothing to do with this woman under any circumstances, although that didn't stop you from constantly trying to match him up with someone." "Allison, stand next to him," Caroline ordered. Allison came and stood next to me. She studiously avoided looking at me. "Listen," Caroline called. "Did you see how it caught fire?" Stupidity. How could I not notice this? June brought two very important changes into my life. Allison and I got married for the first time, bought a big, beautiful house, and started our life together. Secondly, I bought a new custom Mustang Shelby GT 500 KR Super Snake. Driving this car is an experience. This is not a GT-type sports car, this is a muscle car. Difference is a very American theme. This car has so much power that my tires lasted a few months at most, and it was a more tangible experience to drive. When I accelerate, the seat pushes me forward with surprising force. At the same time, the resistance between the vehicle's acceleration and the opposing force of gravity feels like being caught in a vice. The GT has a lot of power, but it has almost 800 horses. That's fantastic. I also kept her away from what Allison was riding. I bought her a new F-150, but I couldn't get this woman out of the truck. Of course, Allison is my soulmate. We don't have the doubts and conflicts that Tammy Jo and I have. We fit together like tires and wheels. Without one or the other, we are useless. Speaking of Tammy Jo, she was furious when she found out I was getting married again. The first meeting with her and Ellie was not pleasant. I quote a famous phrase from the movie Alien. "Stay away from him, honey," Tammy Jo screamed. Allison calmly walked up to her and looked her up and down. Tammy Jo was having trouble breathing, almost hyperventilating. Let me tell you, many guys have ruined their perfect fruit panties just by watching her huge breasts expand and contract with every breath. I'm proud of myself because I feel like I've grown. Her huge swaying breasts did not provoke my usual reaction. My days of being drugged, hypnotized, and dominated by her breasts were clearly over. "She is there, right?" Allison asked. She looked at me and I nodded. "Well, she no longer has to worry about drowning, if you don't leave my husband alone." "Tammy," started Joe. No, Allison said quietly, shaking her head. "He is no longer your husband. Are you divorced?" "It's just a stupid legal technicality," Tammy Jo snorted. "She's doing a lot better since I last saw her. On the third day, everything seemed to be settled. The breasts, hips, and stomach have increased." "I have 3 words for you," Tammy Jo shouted. "Leave Danny alone." "I have 2 for you," Ellie said. Squats and breath fresheners. I laughed until I lost consciousness. Very interesting. Plus, when 2 women fight over me, it's very sexy. It also made me realize that I have moved forward in my life. Allison is everything I want in a woman. I enjoyed comparing not only the 2 women, but also the differences in my feelings towards them. For Tammy Jo, it's teenage love. It's very hot here, but full of ups and downs. I kept jumping over obstacles to impress him. I felt like I had to earn his love over and over again. It's like I'm under a microscope every day. I loved him very much, but we just weren't right for each other. We're always trying new things because we need a constant source of new experiences to keep our relationships fresh and not stagnate. Tammy Jo needed to experiment sexually for 2 reasons. Although she would never admit it, her addiction to having sex with multiple partners had caused her to lose her virginity, and she was determined to prove that it hadn't destroyed her. Another reason is that even though she claims to love me, which I really can't deny completely, I don't think I'm enough for her. That's why going to a sex party with her was so important. He got the sex he needed, but still kept me around to satisfy his emotional needs. With Ellie, it's different. We are equal or compatible in all aspects of our relationship. We don't need to do any experiments or anything like that. We are very happy to be together. Our love didn't show through the ups and downs that TD and I went through together. No matter what happens, we love each other. I don't need to prove to him that I'm right or vice versa. Each of us knew that we would be together forever. When Ellie told me she loved me, it was more than just words. I can feel. The next time I laughed out loud was when I came home one day to find Tammy Jo sitting on my couch. I'm ready to call the police because I don't use violence against women. "Tammy Jo, where's Ellie?" I screamed. I really thought she might have hurt him or something. "I'm here, idiot," Ellie said from behind me. I turned around and hugged her as tightly as I could. "Danny, I'm fine," he said. "Tammy Jo is here to apologize." "What?" I asked. "This is clearly a ruse. My therapist told me that I would finally have to accept the fact that I lost you because of my selfish actions and move on," Tammy Jo said. "Allison had nothing to do with our breakup, and it was wrong for me to attack her. I came here to apologize, and she accepted my apology. I hope that when the pain of my actions subsides, we can be friends too," Tammy Jo said. She smiled and looked sincere. Wow. I think I should give this bitch an Oscar. But in the days that followed, it seemed to me that I was wrong. Tammy, Jo, and Allison seemed to have become friends. Over the next few weeks, they spent more and more time together. When I come home, I often see them lounging by our pool in their bathing suits. When Ellie wasn't looking, TD leaned over so I could easily see her breasts or ass. We even had dinner together a couple of times, which honestly wasn't that bad, and we had a great time. Tammy Jo then played her card. He proposed to us one evening after a barbecue. We all ate delicious food and felt good in the moonlight. "Why don't we come in?" Tammy Jo said. "I'm not sure I want to watch a movie on a night like this," I said. "All this romantic moonlight makes me think differently." "Exactly what I said," Tammy Jo said. Her voice was so full of desire that her words were drowned out. She looked drunk, even though we both only had a couple of beers. "What are you talking about, TD?" Ellie asked. She stood up, her hair standing on end. "Allison, you're Danny's wife. I'm Danny's wife." "That's what we have in common," Tammy Jo says. "When I say I still love him, you tell me you understand. I also said that I have very strong feelings for you. I think we should all have relationships together. I don't want to argue with you about this. Let's share it and share it with you." "Bitch, it's time for you to get out of my house," Ellie said. "This is the most evil person I have ever seen in my life." "Look, girl, I'll give him to you for now, but you don't have what it takes to make Danny happy in the long run," Tammy told Jo. She adjusted her corset and accidentally exposed her breasts under her dress. "Is this true, Danny?" Ellie asked, looking at me meaningfully. Just like in Star Trek, enemy ships scan each other to assess the situation and enemy strength. "God, no," I said. "I said from the very beginning that I didn't want anything to do with her. Honey, I also told you what Tammy Jo was like. To quote Rick James, this girl is a super weirdo. I said she was trying to get me to sex parties and stuff. But I have also told you too many times that you and I will always be together, and no one needs the USA. I broke up with Tammy Jo because I wasn't good enough for her. I love you more than him. I never wanted to share you with anyone." "Get out of my house," Allison told Tammy Jo. "There's something wrong with you. You don't look like a real woman. You're like a fake woman in an adult movie, having sex with other women in front of men. It seems that every man has a fantasy of seeing two women together. I've never met a woman in real life who would do this. Even if they exist, I am not one of them. And your plan also means that I want to share my husband with you. This will never happen. I'm enough for him. You just made the worst mistake of your life, baby." Tammy was screaming at Jo. "I'll still return it, but now it will cost you much more and can be very painful. Just check. You will look back and regret not taking me up on my offer. We will be very happy together. Danny is mine, but with a noble heart, I want to share him with you." Tammy Jo looked at me. "Danny, I went to therapy and was cured of all my sexual problems. But to be honest, it wasn't the therapist who cured me. Anyone can change if they really want to. I found that many people didn't care about me. Using my body gives me less pleasure than lying on the couch and watching a movie with you. I'm changing clothes. I am ready to share with you if necessary, just to get you back into my life, but only for a while." We didn't see Tammy Jo again for the next few weeks. We heard several stories and assumed that she was angry and hysterical. I heard stories about her having fun with a group of guys in bars and other stories that I really hoped weren't true. Deep down, I feel sorry for Tammy Jo. My accountant also told me that Tammy Jo spent almost all the money I gave her during the divorce. If you didn't slow down, you could even lose your home by missing your final mortgage payment. Even if he slows down, if I stop giving him a ton of money, he'll have to look for a job. We also heard that Tammy Jo started dating Bobby McGillicuddy. Bobby is the son of Mayor McGillicuddy. He was a few years younger than Tammy Jo and I, but what he lacked in experience he made up for in his ability to get into trouble and be a bully. It all started when I was in college. I remember hearing about at least 3 cases of sexual assault against him. 2 cases were settled out of court, and the 3rd case was classified as second-degree sexual assault. Second-degree criminal sexual conduct earned Bobby probation and community service. He was also placed on the county sex offender registry, saving him from a lengthy prison sentence. For some reason, the media never reported this, so his father continued to run. I wondered why Tammy Jo was dating someone like Bobby, but then I started to understand. In fact, they have a lot in common. They were both quite extravagant when it came to sex. Bobby was probably wild enough to bore Tammy Jo, and Tammy Jo certainly didn't mind letting Bobby out of jail. There's also the fact that Tammy Jo needs money, and Bobby is the mayor's son. This is a wonderful game. 2 weeks later, I had the worst experience of my life. I was walking home thinking about Allison when my old friend Dave Peterson, now the sheriff, came up to me. "Danny, you have to come with me to the hospital," he said. "Danny, I'm so sorry." "Dave, what are you talking about?" I asked. He drove me to the hospital with the siren on. He was convinced that Ellie was dead. Dave said no, but didn't say anything else. When I arrived, the doctor had difficulty looking me in the eye. I was led into a small room. I opened the door and saw Ellie pressed against the wall. I approached her and started talking. I asked him what happened. She didn't look me in the eye or talk to me. Tears streamed down her face and she shrank even more. I carefully began to massage his back and sides. I started to move away from her and she moaned. "That's a good sign," said a voice behind me. I turned around and saw an older woman, curvy but attractive. It turned out to be Dr. Ellie. "You're the first person to touch her since we found her this afternoon," the woman told me. "What happened to him?" I asked. "Your wife was drugged and beaten," he said slowly and carefully. I saw that he was trying to hide his feelings. "Who?" I whistled. "We don't know yet, and she hasn't told the police or anyone else," the doctor said. His injury was less serious than he thought. Danny whispered behind us. I left the doctor and walked over to Ellie. "Yes, honey," I said. "Do you still want to marry me?" He asked in such a quiet voice that he was almost inaudible. "Ellie, are you crazy?" I asked. "I fell in love with you from the first day we met. Remember how you crashed my car? I'm still in your debt," he whispered. "Ellie, you already paid," I said. "How?" she asked. I said, "Baby, all the love you give me is worth more than a car." "Take me home, Danny," he said. "These people are stupid. You can't help me. I just need you to take care of me. I want to go home." I took off my coat, covered her with it, and took her in my arms. She was still very small, but seemed more fragile. The doctor tried to stand in front of me, but my cold eyes told him it was inappropriate. "Sir, we need to be checked." He looked at me again, seeing the anger in my eyes. "Well, we've done everything necessary, but if you can get her back, we'd love to see her again." I nodded and led her to my car. Before I could get to the door, Dave came up to us. "Danny, I need to ask you some questions." "Dave, he's a victim, not a criminal," I said. "You have to find the idiot who did this. Someone somewhere must have seen something. I hope you find him before me. You remember my skills, right?" Dave suddenly took a step back and reflexively put his hand on the gun. "I'm so sorry, Danny," he said. I sat down in the chair by the door with Ellie on my lap. I waved to the guard as he approached. "You are an expert in law enforcement, aren't you?" I asked. The guard puffed out his chest. "Did you see what just happened between me and the sheriff, right?" I asked. "You mean when he pulled out his service weapon?" asked the guard. "Enough. Thank you," I said. Dave looked at me in confusion as the guard left. "As it was before?" I asked him. "Now I have a witness without cause. You almost pulled a gun on me when I arrested the victim of a crime your department couldn't solve. I don't think newspapers and voters realize that the very people they are supposed to protect are threatening defenseless citizens," I said. "But Danny, that's not what happened," he said. "Dave, that is, until you make a decision. He'll hire lawyers, private security, and everything else to protect her. Danny, can I come to your house later today?" "I just want to ask you a few questions," he asked. I said, "She's been through a lot. I'll call you when I'm ready." It took Ellie several days to feel better. Dave comes up and asks him questions. I know he had to do this to find the culprit, but I still think it's terrible. Finally, Dave asked me to leave the room. My instinct to protect her from any trouble worked against us. When Dave left, I got angry again. I could see how hard it was for her to describe what had happened, and her memory of the people and animals who had done it was like reopening a wound before it had a chance to heal. "We'll get through this, Ellie," I told her. "We'll be fine. Don't you want me to go?" she asked. I was surprised again. "Ellie, why do you keep asking?" I asked. "I love you more than anything. Why the hell do I want you to leave? It's even difficult for me to go to work because we have to be apart for a long time." She simply smiled and took my hand. "I love you too, idiot," he said with tears in his eyes, but that didn't convince everyone. "The one who promises to be with you forever will do so," I said firmly. "Not if they think I'm damaged goods," he said. I just looked at this. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I knew she would tell me when she was ready. It took Ellie several weeks to feel better. Some things recover faster than others. After that, we did not separate for the first few days. We even had to go to the bathroom together. She couldn't bear for a moment to have him leave her. Believe me, it was torture. No man in his right mind would want to see what women do in the bathroom. I'm always amazed by some of the things my wonderful wife does on a regular basis. One of the things that I predict will take us a long time to recover from is our sex lives. I made a mistake. Almost as soon as the bruise healed, Ellie wanted me, as if he needs to make sure that our connection here is not broken. I loved her very tenderly and very slowly, and she just couldn't stop. It was one of those moments that convinced me that everything was okay. The challenge is to get Ellie out of the house and make her feel comfortable around others. One night, Tammy Jo came to visit and again apologized for her previous behavior. He realized how much Ellie had changed, but stated that he had not heard anything about what happened to her. This was a loud and clear wake-up call for me, as almost everyone who came to offer their condolences and well wishes communicated with Tammy Jo on a regular basis. If they knew everything, then why didn't she? I have a bad feeling about this whole situation. Throughout this entire ordeal, I tried not to ask Ellie how it happened, what was going on, or how many people were there. I want her to understand that the most important thing to me is that she survives and knows that I still love her and will always love her. Where I come from, a woman who has kissed another man at least once is considered a good girl. Her husband will no longer have anything to do with her. If you do this, you will not be considered a man. I was absolutely sure I was going to lose her. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. Ellie, you'll never lose me unless I go to jail for killing the people who did this to you, I told her. We went in and kissed until we fell asleep. I now realize that this was a false statement. Months have passed since the attack. Dave, your department hasn't learned anything yet. You called her several times and asked what she said, but you didn't know. Now I understand that you always knew Bobby and perhaps his friends. You're blind to this, Dave. When it comes to your work, you complete your tasks with a smile. Dave wanted to say something, but didn't. A few weeks later, the man who held Ellie's hands while Bobby had sex with her died. He died of an overdose or something. We didn't know he was involved until Bobby told us. I didn't tell you. Another person was killed 2 weeks ago. Bobby told me that too. He said it was a hunting accident. I think Ellie knew, but she had nothing to do with his death. But I had my own problems at the time, I said. You see, I feel like my world is falling apart. I was convinced that I was losing the only thing that really mattered to me. Ellie and I continued. We know you'll never catch them, Dave. I started to suggest to Ellie that it was time for us to start a family, but she avoided the topic or changed it. One day I tried to push her, and she told me that this was not the right time in our lives. Maybe a month or so, he said. I'm in pain. Of course, I always believed that the woman I love would want to have children with me. Something is wrong here. Then I got a call from Shunkilla, I said, making a Tammy Jo face. She acted like she was hurt, and it hurt her to tell me this. She said women who experience traumatic events sometimes become distorted. He told me about Stockholm Syndrome and other very strange mental illnesses. She told me that if nothing happened between me and Ellie, I could always go back to her. At the same time, he also asked me to lend him money. That's when I noticed Ellie was acting strange. It breaks my heart because I really can't imagine my life without her. But at the same time, my heart was broken, betrayed by someone who vowed to love me forever. You know what they say in Star Trek? Fool me once and you will be ashamed. So I hired a guy to look after her. 2 days later, he returned and told me that he had information. My heart is broken. I can't believe this happened to me again. When I saw your report, I wanted to cry. This morning, about half an hour after I arrived at work, Ellie got dressed and went to a bar on the east side. He spent a lot of time drinking and talking to men the private investigator didn't know. There are photographs there. He showed me the photograph. Ellie and Bobby McGillity spend time together. The worst thing is what I discovered later. She used our money to hire a private investigator to track him down. He also didn't know then that it belonged to Bobby and that the other two were simply holding it. I didn't know what to do or what to feel. I felt like my world was coming to an end. That evening I came home and went to bed. Ellie came up to me and I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want her to know what I knew, so I tried to act normal, but I wasn't very good at it. She felt that something was wrong. He tried to hug me and talk to me, but I just told him that I needed time. I told her it was a job, but I wasn't sure she believed me. She lay on the bed with me and I just looked at her. His angelic face gave no clue as to what he was doing. Women are simply the best liars, definitely. Looking into Ellie's eyes, I did not see the slightest sign of betrayal. All I saw was love and care. God, what an idiot I am. I may have deserved everything she did to me because, unlike TD, she was angry. But damn, I still loved Ellie. I guess I'd like to know what I'm doing wrong. Maybe because he felt he couldn't protect her. Maybe that's why he doesn't want to have children with me. I don't understand why I feel so bad. That's at least double what happened to Tammy Joe. The next morning, it was even worse. I knew I would have to get a divorce. It's impossible to deal with someone who cheated on me. Love is one thing, but stupidity is another. I love Ellie enough to die for her if I have to, but not enough to let her deceive me. I went to work early to start the divorce. That day was the first of many events. This was the first time I left the house without saying goodbye to Ellie. After some time, he called me at work, and for the first time, I did not answer his call. Later that day, my private investigator called me and told me that he had overheard a phone conversation between Bobby and Ellie. Ellie called him on her cell phone. He repeated the call to me. "Hi, honey," Ellie said. "Can I meet you today, perhaps?" replied Bobby. "What do you mean?" "I think it's time to get to know each other better," Ellie said. "My heart is broken again." "I booked a room at the Shangri-La Motel," Ellie said. "We can have lunch together, and I'll be home before Danny gets home from work." "Why do all the women I know talk about this man?" Bobby asked. "He's not that special. I wonder if she loves me that much because he cheated on me?" "It's okay, honey," Bobby said. "I understand now. He doesn't like dirty things. As far as I know, Ellie too, but nothing surprises me anymore. Yes, my wife is purring. If you play my game to the end, it will be unlike anything you have ever experienced before." "It's okay, honey," Bobby said. "I understand now. He just doesn't like it. Apparently Ellie too, but nothing surprises me anymore." "Yes, honey," my wife purred. "If you follow my rules, it will be like nothing you have ever experienced." She gave him directions to the motel and the room number. I screamed and threw the phone across the room. I walked over and took it. "Sorry," said my private investigator. "You're out of luck, but at least you can get rid of this bitch and start a new life. Believe me, I experienced this myself. Keep trying until you find a good one." I burst into tears and told him that I thought I had found him. I sat at the table and looked at the computer. I didn't do anything that morning. I sat and thought about Ellie. Thoughts of revenge arose in my head. Maybe. No. I can't do this to him. But I can. No. I'll make that bastard pay for my damn car. Probably no. But I knew I wanted to do something about it. I had no intention of walking away peacefully into the beautiful night or even that day. "Okay," I say. Then I realized that it was almost lunchtime and Ellie would soon be meeting this idiot. I decided to crash his damn party and let him know that he shouldn't come home and that I might have to kick Bobby's ass for him. I jumped up and ran to my Mustang. I had barely started when my phone rang. I answered the phone, and it was Tammy Joe. She wanted to know how he was. She seemed nice and said she had started a new life and just wanted to be my friend. I knew I would need a friend for the next few days, so I talked to her while I was driving. When I got to the motel, I told TD I would call them later. She looked so happy that I almost forgot what a slut she was. It got me thinking, can people change? But I realized that the only thing I was waiting for was the loneliness that awaited me in life without Ellie. I tried to use TD as a lifeline to keep from drowning in the sea of despair I was about to plunge into. I realized that I would be even stupider if I drove away one liar and then got involved with another. I walked into the room where Ellie was telling Bobby. When I looked out the window, I was shocked. Bobby was lying naked on the bed. His hands seemed to be tied to the head of the bed. Allison was next to him, but fully clothed. I've seen CF&M videos online, so this doesn't surprise me. When I saw Ellie beat Bobby, she wanted to beat him like a cowboy. I remember her saying that he had to play his game until the end. I slowly turned the knob and opened the door. She was busy taking care of her lover and did not hear him. I can hear him telling you now that it doesn't sound very romantic. "You know what, silly? I'll be a good mother," she said. "It's a pity that I can't take your friends." But when I realized what I needed to do, they were already dead. "You'll never be anyone's mother, you crazy," he said. "You'll be ready as soon as I'm free." "Who said you have to be free?" she asked. "I will do everything I can to protect Danny, so I can't let you go." Then I saw what he had in his hand. It was a relatively small item to me, but in his hands it seemed important. In the museum's replica catalog, it is called the Venetian axe. This is a battle replica of a one-handed, single-headed battle axe used in 14th century Italy. This is a wonderful article. It has a slightly curved handle. It is made of chrome-plated steel with brass plating. On the back of the head, there is a bronze lion. The front of the axe tapers to a sharp edge. Many axes are only designed to damage or apply pressure to armor and are therefore not very sharp. In this case, I realize that it has nothing to do with sex. I'm missing something. Ellie didn't cheat on me. She only lured Bobby here for another reason. What did he mean when he said he would do anything to protect me? Stupidity. You interrupted me. You're a crazy bitch, Bobby shouted. You don't have to defend your lucky one. I was already doing karate. Besides, everything depends on him. If anything happens to Tammy Jo, it will tear us apart. It was all his idea. She just wants him to think you're a slut so she can give him another chance. Then he tried to change tactics. I'm sorry I got involved in this. I'm sorry for what we did to you. We really think you'll love these features of the system. Baby, you've got so much shit in you. You gotta like everything you see. Thank you. That's all I need to know, Ellie said. God, I wish you would tell the fat girl, and I would too. I'll tell you, he said. Leave alone. As I spoke, I saw my wife raise an axe above her head. I can't let Ellie do this. I slid behind her. He closed his eyes and bit his lip. She really wanted to do this. I grabbed his hand and kissed it before he let go. No, Ellie, I said, kissing her again. Time stood still, and we both realized we had made a terrible mistake. She thought I was going to jail a few weeks ago when I lied about killing all those bastards. To prevent this from happening, she decided to catch them herself. The first two died in an accident, but she convinced Bobby to have sex with her. I've been very depressed lately. She thought it was because I was upset about the whole situation. He pointed to the recorder next to the bed, which was still recording everything that happened. He gets Bobby to confess on tape and hints that Tammy Jo is guilty. I love you, Danny, he said. I need to end this so we can have a baby. I didn't want to risk getting pregnant and going to jail. What if I actually have to hurt this shit and go to jail? You don't need a prisoner's wife. If I were you, I would do this, I told him as we kissed hungrily. I thought you tricked me, I said. She just smiled and laughed. Danny, I said I could never do this to anyone else. What can I do to convince you? Then something happened. We were so passionate about the kiss that the axe slipped out of Ellie's hands and fell on the bed. The head of the axe is the heaviest part and is designed to strike first. In this case, it happened. Unfortunately, the axe falls just as often as Bobby falls. Bobby's screams could probably be heard in the next state. As you can hear on the recording, Ellie and I didn't know what to do. I ran to the bathroom and bought her a towel while Ellie called an ambulance. I threw him a towel and asked him to apply pressure to the wound, but I didn't want the bastard to hold on. I would prefer him to die. Luckily, the ambulance arrived before I started bleeding or going into shock or anything like that. This means the bastard didn't die, and everything else was his fault. The question is, Dave, what are you going to do? In this recording, Bobby admitted that he and two of his friends attacked my wife. They also admitted that Tammy Jo advised them to do it. Everyone in the room looked at Dave. Tammy Jo headed for the door. I'm so sorry, Danny, he said, but it's also your fault. If you could get away from that little red-haired whore, or at least let me share you with her, we'd both be happy right now. His confession is a bit like the end of every Scooby-Doo episode, where the villain says, I could have gotten away with this without the kids involved. He tried to push away the two policemen standing at the door, but they remained unmoved. Danny, you're the reason I'm in trouble, Dave said. Thanks to this connection, his only son was able to spend a long time in prison. Even if it was an accident, I can blame you or Allison and maybe exonerate Bobby. But I'm ready to make a deal. Give me the ribbon, and you and the redhead are out of here. Everyone went home and we forgot everything. It never happened. As we all know, Bobby lost his dignity in a work accident. How do you say, Martha? I asked. Martha simply looked at her shoes. Joe did the same. Even my own lawyer couldn't look me in the eye. He slept with Martha. Ellie whispered in my ear as we watched. Honey, we need another lawyer. Since he and Martha slept together and she, like Dave, became mayor, they both began to accept the joke. I took a deep breath. Joe, you're fired, I said. You are no longer a lawyer in my office. You will no longer receive orders from us. He looked angry, but I knew he meant it. Martha, I have always admired you. I've always found you not only charming, but also honest and committed to law and justice in this city. I made a mistake. The people of this city will miss you. What are you talking about, she says. It's either you or me. If I hadn't accepted this nonsense, I might have lost my job. Where is your honor and self-respect? I asked. It's easy for you to say stupid things, he replied dryly. Essentially, their business is to print money. The rest of us will have to live with it. Try to pay off your mortgage with dignity. Do your best to pay off your car loan and then come back and talk to me about it. Dave, you were one of my best friends growing up. I really hope you stop doing stupid things and do the right thing, I told him. Danny is the right choice for me and my family. I need to feed my children. But look at it this way. He won't be able to do this to other women anymore, even if they can put his dick back in, Dave said, looking down. Danny, Tammy Jo will get hers too. Every time he looks at you together, he feels everything he has lost. He and Allison had enough money to move to another place. It's okay, Dave, I said. I really hope this won't happen. Before? He asked sadly. Mustang, I said out loud. Everyone in the room looked at me like I was crazy. Danny, why are you screaming? What is your car? Asked David. What does this have to do with anything? A few seconds later, several heavily armed men wearing vests that read FBI or state police burst into the room. They handcuffed Tammy Jo, Martha, and Dave. Dave's two assistants were warned not to interfere. As everyone sat down, another man in a suit entered. Dave found out about it, as did Martha and Joe. He's a prosecutor. Dave and Martha were charged with breach of public trust and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The mayor can also participate in this. Bobby was charged with assault, and Tammy Jo was charged with solicitation of a crime and conspiracy. Joe could lose his law license for violating professional ethics. The Attorney General assured me that Bobby's incident was most likely an accident and that neither Ellie nor I would be charged, especially given the circumstances and the conspiracy to keep her attacker out of jail. A few minutes later, he told us that we could go home, but not leave the city. We must testify, but we have a strong case against him. Then it was just me and Ellie. She kissed me again, and we headed to my incredibly powerful Mustang. We feel that the burden of the world has been lifted from our shoulders. Can we pick up the car tomorrow, or send someone to pick it up? She asked. I just need to be near you now, idiot. Why am I an idiot? I asked. Oh, there are so many reasons, he said. Trust me, you're an idiot. If I'm an idiot, why did you get into my car? Also, maybe I should let Joe get the divorce papers he's working on, I said. For a moment, it seemed as if she had been hit. The smile on his face disappeared, replaced by a frown. His face turned pale, as if all the blood had disappeared at the same speed. You, he began. Ellie, I'm so sorry, I said. I thought he was an idiot, he said. You're an idiot, Danny, but you're my idiot. Never forget this. And Joe has no plans to become a lawyer anytime soon, so that won't be a problem for me. Name one, I said. Let me hear one. DJP Plaza, he said. What are you saying? We asked, smiling at the same time. You first, I said. I want to hear some reasons why I'm an idiot. Okay, he said, but don't be angry if I go further. You're an idiot for not understanding how much I love you, Danny. I'd be lost without you. No, this is not even your world. Reason number 2, how could you think that I could cheat on you? This goes beyond mere stupidity. It looks like a traumatic brain injury, but I think you have brain damage, just idiot, because TD actually lied to you. So you might still be surprised that I raised you there because I love you, idiot. He saw me sitting with my mouth open. Then he closed it and carefully raised his chin. Well, I guess I can't stop there, he said, laughing. You're an idiot who honestly thinks I don't want to have children with you. God, you're an idiot. What do I tell you every time you invade me? I must. Okay, that's enough, I said. What is DJP Plaza? You asked me to say one. She smiled and took my hand. I think I'll name one of my children after his father. So DJP Square is a novel by Daniel James Payne too. But if you think it's too formal or flashy, we can call it Fool Jr. I leaned forward, kissed her, and started the Mustang's powerful engine. This beast is hard to drive at low speeds because, like all KRSs, the factory supercharger has been replaced with a more powerful one. Danny, I kept quiet when you told me this story, but you lied, he said. I saw the private investigator's report hidden in his office. You will know who these people are before you die. I thought you'd try to hurt them and end up in jail. I can't let you waste your life on me, so I'll have to get Bobby off the street before you catch him. Bobby's friend, Stu Morgenstern, provided the substance they used against you. He offers Bobby a bottle of GBL. Bobby gave him the TD. When you meet her at lunch, she pretends to be a waiter and pours you a drink. I know this because my private investigator overheard Stu bragging about it when he was trying to sell the item to someone else. From this conversation, we also learned the name of another of Bobby's friends, Duncan Holmes. We didn't know that Bobby was involved in the attack. We thought he was just helping Downing cheer you up. Duncan is that guy. I stopped and changed the subject because I didn't want to remind him of his attack. I kissed her deeply and passionately. This is something I've been doing a lot lately. Every time we talked about his attack, he tried to replace the bad memory with a better one. In any case, I had nothing to do with his death. GBL is very strong and toxic. In small doses, it is used as a sexual substance. The difference between a dose that causes a person to have sex with everything in sight and an overdose that can cause coma or death is very small. The difference between the dose that induces a coma and the dose required to kill a person in a few minutes is even smaller. As far as I understand, Stu had a party at his house. This is a very bad place in the city. You put your GBL there. Anyway, he had a party with his friends, and it turns out his favorite beer bottle was the one he kept all his GBLs in. You were at the sheriff's office complaining about how you handled your cases of beer, he laughed. How do you know? I asked. There was fake surprise on my face. I love you, idiot, he said. DJP Square was born 10 months later. Subscribe to our channel so that the second drop does not deceive you, and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you are under 18 years of age, please do not listen to the following episodes. Listen to the next person.